Week 10 notable games coming up. Yes, we're already turning the page. Tampa Bay's going for his second win in a row against Seattle in the league's first ever game in Munich. Bills trying to bounce back. They are favorites against the 7-1 Vikings. Start of a statement stretch for Minnesota. We'll see how they do. And it's Austin Eckler versus Christian McCaffrey, two guys who were drafted in the same class. Niners welcome the Chargers to the Bay. The hosts, the favorites in that one. So let's get some early insight into those games with resident NFL analyst Brady Quinn and Danny Kanell. Let's start with the game in Germany, TB12 against Geno Smith. They face off for the fifth time, but since their first meeting in 2014, Brady's added 3 rings to his hand. The Bucs, the slight favorites, but are they, Brady?
I mean, what a point they're giving up right now.
It's almost a pick 'em.
I think the Seattle Seahawks are playing as the better team, and I think if you look at how the Seahawks, this young defense matches up with the Tampa Bay Bucs, I think it's pretty favorable. So I'll go ahead and take the point as far as an early lean looking at this one, too, at Allianz Arena there in Germany. I love saying Allianz.
Nice,
I don't know why. But no, this should be a close game, and in part because Tampa Bay has a hard time scoring points, with the exception of their 44-second drive to go win the game last week. And looking at Geno Smith, I mean, he's in the MVP conversation. Like, we have to give him his props. He should be a part of that.
He's not in the GOAT conversation because that conversation is closed. I actually am really curious to see, because I thought that drive, was it 44 seconds or 35 seconds? Whatever it was, no timeouts left. That was clearly a season-saving drive where at least you salvaged the possibility of making the playoffs. But I also wonder if that's a huge weight off of every offensive player on the Bucs' back. Because we saw them pressing, they've had drop balls, just nothing has gone right. And then all of a sudden it clicked like that. And it was only 4 or 5 plays, whatever it was. And I just wonder if that's a huge sigh of relief where they can go out there and just kind of play and like let this thing open. I think they're like, you know what? We threw it 58 times. Who cares? We throw it 58 again. Let's just go out there and let Tom Brady do his thing. I'm very curious to see how they respond and then how long the Seahawks, Cinderella story can continue. Kenneth Walker keeps toting the rock. Geno Smith is managing the system and starting to actually make plays to win games. I also think the time is going to be an issue because think about Tampa East Coast. I don't even know. I can't even track how many time zones Seattle is crossing, but it's a lot, and I think that's going to be something to keep an eye on in this game.
You go back to that drive. Think about who was just stepping up there at the end. Kate Otten, right? The rookie tight end.
Yeah.
Scotty Miller. Those would be the guys.
And Scotty Miller had just dropped the pass for the touchdown that would have won the game in the series before. I think just everybody can kind of breathe, and it makes you feel better at the facility when you're practicing. Curious to see what it does for the Bucs season.
That game at 9:30 a.m. Eastern Time on Sunday from Allianz Arena in Munich, Germany, the home of German giants Bayern Munich, who of course play a different brand of football, one of the great teams in all of world football. The Vikings, Kings of the North, 4.5 game lead atop that division. They're in Buffalo this week, 7.5-point road dogs. As mentioned, this is going to be a prove-it stretch for the Minnesota Vikings against the Super Bowl favorites here. Who would this win be bigger for at this point? The Vikings or the Bills?
I don't know. That's a good question. I think in part because the AFC East is so competitive right now, and the Bills need the wins in order to differentiate themselves from everyone else. But for the Vikings, I mean, they have such a stranglehold right now in the NFC North. If they could win this one on the road in Buffalo, it would only sustain, I think, a lot of the thoughts you have right now that maybe the Vikings could end up finding their way into that #1 overall seed. And take a look at Kirk Cousins, who, don't be fooled, folks. He's been, in his own words, he's been absolutely strapped for a while now. We just haven't noticed.
You mean Kirk Thuggins that's out there on the ride on the way home. I think there's no question this is bigger for the Vikings, even though they have a better record. Kirk Cousins has so many doubters and haters that just look at him all the time, say he just pads stats late in games and late in the season. He is consistently a top 10 quarterback statistically, but in the bigger games, typically is where he has not shined on the big stage. So I think for him, everybody loves Josh Allen. He's the favorite for the MVP. If they win, they're supposed to. They're the 7.5-point favorite. I think it means way more for the Vikings. Because I think even everybody's talking about the Eagles. It's the Eagles in the NFC, and the Vikings are right there in the conversation.
He's on pace for 4,000 yards, probably 25 touchdowns again. It seems kind of boring. T.J. Hawkinson, who they just acquired, second in receptions last week, he got to work. And then you look at the Bills. Josh Allen's not played well over the past couple of weeks now. 2 touchdowns, the 4 interceptions, a little over 50% completion percentage, and a lot less yards, like about 210-plus yards per game. It's going to be a challenge. I'm almost I don't want to give away any betting advice because it's way too soon right now.
I like the Vikings in the points.
I would almost take the points, but something tells me after that loss to the Jets, there's going to be something about the Buffalo Bills coming back and wanting to make sure they proved everyone they're still the best team in the NFL.
It's certainly going to be a good game, and you just wonder how much a win, if the Vikings were to get it, would legitimize them as Super Bowl contenders. For all the blame that quarterback Aaron Rodgers has been handing out to his Green Bay teammates, one would hope that he's taking some blame today because he was absolutely putrid on Sunday. A terrible loss to the Lions. Now they host Dak Prescott and the Cowboys. He's been good against Dallas. I mean, we'll give him that. But do you have them kind of bouncing back here, or is it a sixth straight loss for Rodgers?
I mean, it's in Lambeau, and I look at that number at 5 points to the Cowboys. I'm going, hold on. Like, at some point, this thing's going to turn. It's a bad matchup, though. Like, that's the issue. Is the Packers cannot stop the run. You talk about Rodgers playing putrid. Their defense has played putrid against the run, and the Cowboys can run the football. So that's going to be an issue for the Packers' defense. And offensively, look, the Dallas Cowboys can get after Aaron Rodgers, too, with the way they rush. So I'm tempted now to lay the points, even though it's like a cardinal sin to bet against Rodgers at home in Lambeau. But the way they look right now.
Saying that all season.
But also we saw him in primetime against the Bills cover as a 10.5-point favorite cover. I think it was a 10-point game.
Yeah.
I think you got to back the Packers here in this spot. Like the Cowboys, do we really trust them on the road? I think the Cowboys win the game. Also, as bad as it's been, they've been, except for the Bills game, they've kind of been in a one-possession type game, field goal-ish. So I'm going to say he gets it done. I think he'll bounce back, but I think the Cowboys will win.
Let's not forget, too, Rashawn Gary, most likely a torn ACL.
Yeah, he's out for the year.
I mean,
John Runyon was off in that game as well. So, I mean, that hurts the offensive line. So Aaron Jones banged up, but he's expected to play. So you just wonder how it looks for Green Bay coming into this game. Alan Lazard was a little bit hobbled coming into this week as well. Lastly, Chargers at the Niners. Danny, McCaffrey versus Eckler. These two players were drafted in the same class together. They've both been prolific. I think first and third this year in terms of the stats for running backs. Is this a season that, it sets up as a great battle between these two, or do you think that, one team has the edge over the other? Because this looks like a really tight game.
I'm surprised the spread is a touchdown. I honestly,
know.
That's why it kind
big.
of makes me wonder if the odds makers may be onto something. Because, yes, I think that the 49ers get this unbelievable weapon, which they've been having a field day with. Kyle Shanahan, as an offensive mind, is going to figure out ways to give Christian McCaffrey the ball, whether he's throwing it, catching it, or running with it. But I also think that Justin Herbert and this Chargers team are going to have something to say about it. And Austin Eckler, a Swiss Army knife running back of his own, is going to take this matchup personally, too. So I like the Chargers here with that touchdown.
I don't know. I'm looking at this. It's a bad matchup for the Chargers. They've been one of the worst teams at stopping the run. You're taking on the number one rush offense in the San Francisco 49ers, who now have even more time to get Christian McCaffrey acclimated. He hit for the cycle last time, right? Threw one, caught one, rushed for one. They're only going to utilize him more and doing a little bit of a film breakdown, too. You see what they're doing with Tyrion Davis-Price. They put them both into the game at the same time. You can use Christian McCaffrey as a wide receiver. So it's actually kind of bolstered the passing game for Jimmy Garoppolo. Then you mix in Kittle and everything else. I think
Debo?
Yeah, well, he's not healthy yet. He won't be back for this one. But
when it's in.
When he's back, I mean, you start looking at what they're going to be capable of doing. This is going to be a tough team down the stretch with Kyle Shanahan, utilizing the different toys he has within this offense, not to mention the defense getting after Herbert. Now, granted, that the Chargers have actually been really good at protecting Herbert, but this is also one of the better rush teams in the NFL. So, I don't know. This is one where I think the 49ers might be able to take care of business here at home.
Touchdown favorites against the Chargers. Brady Quinn, Danny Kanell giving us their early thoughts ahead of Week 10 of the NFL season. Can't believe we're hitting double digits already in terms of NFL weeks. All right, we have a quintet of great games for you across CBS on Sunday. Kansas City sitting as double-digit favorites as they welcome the Jags, that line is now down to 9.5. The Giants coming off a bye, they are the favorites versus one win Houston, and a good one in Miami is 2, and the Dolphins look to continue rolling. Check your local listings for the game near you.
Do you want a sports network that delivers everything that matters about the game? The highlights, the picks, the instant analysis, no yelling, no fake debates, no politics. Hit the subscribe button and never miss a moment.